Yeah, I'm just going to go live. Welcome to New Realities. This is a watch party, ladies and gentlemen, for the latest hearing that's coming up. We just saw one in House of Representatives. This is the Congressional hearing. This is a U.S. Senate hearing, channel hearing on the activity of all domain anomaly resolution office coverage begins. There it is.
This hearing will come to order. I'd like to first thank our witness, Dr. John Kozlowski, for testifying. He is our newly appointed director of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, an office Congress established in the fiscal year 2022 NDAA to investigate this very serious problem of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP. Dr. Kozlowski comes to AARO from the Research Directorate of the National Security Agency, where he worked in areas of optics research and crypto mathematics. He previously served at the DoD Special Communications Enterprise Office. We look forward to regular engagements between you and the committee. When unidentified anomalous phenomenon enter our airspace, we need to know about it. We need to identify it, but in order to do that, we need to reduce the stigma and credibility challenges associated with these events. Our service members, scientists, foreign partners, and the general public need to know that their reporting, research, and analysis will be taken seriously and acted on in good faith. In the spirit of transparency, AARO recently released a consolidated annual report just a few months after releasing the first volume of the historical record report in March of this year. These public documents help highlight the challenges still facing this office, including the lack of timely and actionable sensor data, the need to revisit cases placed in the active archive, and the importance of improving reporting sources, both in the interagency and internationally. In this hearing, I want to probe a series of specific issues. First, as incidents at Langley and elsewhere have demonstrated, unmanned aerial systems, or UAS, continue to pose significant threats to our national security. In addition to safety of flight issues these UAS create for our own pilots and air crew, the UAS present clear and undeniable counterintelligence concerns around some of the most sensitive airspace. While standard UAS are not part of AARO's mission, your work on sensors at military installations across the country will be critical to making sure that we have the domain awareness necessary to accurately identify and track these objects. I expect your office to also pay close attention to any anomalous characteristics that these systems could present in the future. Second, I look forward to your presentation of 3 case studies demonstrating cases that AARO has resolved, including the Go Fast, which is one of the most prominent UAP cases. However, I believe it is important to acknowledge ongoing public interest in the Nimitz incident, the gimbal video, and other prominent UAP cases, and for AARO to share what it can about those cases as well. It's also important that AARO speak to unresolved cases and what types of anomalous activity have merited further analysis. And while I know AARO has gone through a period of transition over the past year, it is important to share these disclosures, both resolved and unresolved cases, with the public, even when a Senate hearing is not scheduled. Lastly, while some have been hesitant to come forward to AARO in the past, I hope that potential individuals with firsthand knowledge of unreported programs view your arrival in this position as an opportunity for a new start. AARO was created by Congress to do this work. Congress waived non-disclosure agreements for those who disclose information to AARO and gave AARO the authority to go and turn over every rock. I hope those with information to share use this opportunity so that we, as your senators who represent you, can do our jobs. I look forward to hearing more on these issues from Dr. Kozlowski and for members to start a dialogue on this important topic. With that, I would like to turn to Senator Ernst for her opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Kozlowski. Our hearing today is about identifying UAPs and understanding their potential implications, which could range from technological advancements to potential threats to our national security. Are these phenomena tied to foreign adversaries such as China or Russia, leveraging advanced technologies beyond our current capabilities? Or do they represent unknown scientific phenomena that challenge our current understanding? We must answer these critical questions to ensure that our national security is not compromised. It is vital that all agencies work in tandem to aggregate data, identify patterns, and develop robust analytical frameworks. Our ability to detect, track, and respond to UAPs requires the latest technology and full cooperation from all government branches. Thanks very much, Dr. Kozlowski, for your attention to this matter, and I look forward to the valuable insights that you and AARO can provide to our committee, and I yield back. Thank you.
Dr. Kozlowski, please make your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gillibrand, Ranking Member Ernst, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It is a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Department of Defense as the new director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a status update on AARO's work and respond to your questions about unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP. On behalf of the department and the entire AARO team, I want to say how grateful we are to Congress for its continued support. Unidentified objects in any domain pose potential threats to U.S. safety and security. Reports of UAP activity, particularly near national security sites, must be treated seriously and investigated with scientific rigor by the U.S. government. By way of introduction, I'm John Kozlowski. I'm a researcher at my core with an academic background in mathematics, physics, and engineering. I've spent most of my career at the National Security Agency, leading advanced research in the areas of optics, computing, and cryptomathematics. By nature, I am drawn to tough scientific problems, which is what brought me to AARO and the UAP mission. Since I arrived at AARO in August, I've been impressed by the breadth and depth of my team's experience and the framework they've established to rigorously analyze UAP reports. AARO has taken meaningful steps to improve data collection and retention, bolster sensor development, effectively triage UAP reports, and reduce the stigma of reporting UAP events. Last year, AARO worked with the DoD's Joint Staff to issue guidance to defense personnel worldwide on how to report UAP observations and is working with the military services regarding implementation. AARO has also launched a public website that features UAP imagery, case resolutions, material analysis, archival records, and more. These are only a few examples of AARO's recent progress, and we're just getting started. To date, AARO has over 1,600 UAP reports in its holdings from across the U.S. government. I'll share a slide in just a few minutes with updated UAP analytic trends. You'll see that many reports resolve the commonplace objects like birds, balloons, and unmanned systems, while others lack sufficient data for comprehensive analysis. Although only a small percentage of reports received by AARO are potentially anomalous, these are the cases that require significant time, resources, and a focused scientific inquiry by AARO and its network of partners. It is important to underscore that, to date, AARO has not discovered any verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology. To accomplish AARO's national security mission, I have set 3 priorities for the office: building strong partnerships, promoting transparency, and scaling up the work of the office. AARO cannot do its work alone. Building partnerships across government, academia, industry, and with the public is essential to the success of the office. Strong cooperation with the military services is particularly important. We rely on their support to implement our reporting guidance and to amplify the message that there should be zero stigma associated with UAP reporting. We also rely on partnerships with the national labs, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, all of which play a role in the whole of government effort to address UAP. Recognizing the talent and expertise that reside outside of the government, AARO will continue to explore new ways to partner with the academic and scientific communities to investigate its most complex UAP cases. A related priority for AARO is transparency. Our ability to collaborate with key partners, including the scientific community and the public, relies on information sharing, to include downgrading and declassifying UAP-related information. In some cases, it may be unclear to the public why the DoD classified a piece of information in the first place. Why are photos of seemingly benign objects such as balloons classified? It's often the case that an object or phenomenon isn't itself a security concern, but the location, source, or method used to capture it is still sensitive. Many cases are difficult to quickly release to the public, but are reported to the appropriate committees in Congress that are authorized by law or House and Senate leadership to receive the information. It is important to note that AARO does not unilaterally declassify information. Instead, we work with the originator of a classified record to ensure that declassifying that record does not inadvertently harm national security. This can take time. Nonetheless, the department is committed to declassifying and publicly sharing more information on UAP while protecting sensitive sources and methods. I'll be sharing some newly declassified imagery in just a few minutes. AARO is also working closely with the National Archives and Records Administration to make UAP-related documents publicly available in a digitized collection. Meanwhile, AARO continues to review the U.S. historical record relating to UAP. We welcome any former or current government, civilian, contractor, or military service member with relevant information to reach out to us at www.aaro.mil. My final priority is scaling up AARO's work to match its mission. AARO needs to bolster the quantity, quality, and diversity of data that it acquires and examines. This means tapping into existing data sources within the interagency while deploying AARO's own organic sensor capabilities. To the extent that UAP results from the domain awareness gaps, more and better data will help us fill those gaps and help us understand what is being encountered. In closing, AARO is committed to the highest standards of scientific integrity. We will not foreclose on any explanation for UAP prematurely. We will continue to follow the science and data wherever they lead. We will continue to have an open and frank dialogue with Congress in settings like these and in classified briefings. We will continue to keep you fully and currently informed of all UAP information, active or historical. And finally, we will share as much information as possible at the unclassified level to inform the public of AARO's activities and its findings. For now, I'd like to turn to a brief presentation of UAP trends and cases, and then I'd be happy to take questions. Okay, this chart represents the UAP reporting since 1996, and as has previously been discussed by AARO, that sensor placement seems to have caused a bias in our data, both geographic and at altitude. And we're working to resolve that bias in 2025 or reduce that bias through broader engagements with the DoD as well as the IC and the rest of the government, also by incorporating broader sensors into our data and through a public reporting mechanism that we hope to have live in mid-2025. On the left side, it shows the altitudes, and we'll see it's a bit cut off. We'll see that most of the reporting occurs between 15,000 and 25,000 feet. That happens to be where most of our sensors are. And the reporting above and below that is also often coming from those same platforms. In the center, we'll see that the resolved cases have the vast majority being balloons and UAS. We're seeing a great increase in satellites recently, particularly with the launch of mega satellite constellations such as Starlink, where the satellites are catching what is called satellite flares or glint off the sun just after sunset or just before sunrise. And on the rightmost, we'll see the morphology or the shapes that have been reported. The majority have been lights or orbs. We think that there's going to be an increase in the lights with the mega constellations, but our most interesting cases, some of which I'll discuss later, are actually the shapes such as the triangles or the cylinders. And at the bottom, we'll see the geographic bias that I mentioned before, where most of the reports historically had been near the government sites. This bias has been reduced recently by reporting from the FAA. We now get weekly reports from them. And great thank you to our aviators for making those reports. It helps our analysis quite a bit. Okay, a case that we thought would be a transmedium case as it was reported is well known on the outside, known as the Puerto Rico case. It was data collected in 2013 when a Customs and Border Patrol aircraft observed an object flying near an airport in Puerto Rico. The green line in this diagram is the track that the airplane was taking, and those many crossed lines are the directions that the camera was facing at the time that the airplane was flying around the airport, and we'll watch the video in just a moment. The orange arrow in the center is where we assess that the UAP was actually flying, and transmedium means that it goes from one domain into another. In this case, it looks like it goes from the air into the water and then back into the air. We assessed that it was actually flying over the airport the entire time. And this video was taken with infrared, and what appears to be the transmedium part where it goes into the water is actually where the temperature of the water is equal to the temperature of the object, and the camera can no longer distinguish between the two. It's not that the object actually goes into the water. And so we assessed that the object, likely a pair of balloons or sky lanterns, was floating at about 7 knots over the airport and descending to about 200 meters. And this video will be released, and our report will be released later this year. The Go Fast was captured the public attention and congressional attention when it was made public in 2017. Looks like an object flying very fast over the water, very close to the water. Through a very careful geospatial intelligence analysis using trigonometry, we assess with high confidence that the object is not actually close to the water, but is rather closer to 13,000 feet. Diagram here shows as the platform is flying and capturing the object, if it is closer to the platform at a higher altitude, a trick of the eye called parallax makes it look like the object is moving much faster. And so we've written a detailed paper on parallax, released that on our website so that the public can literally check our math on this analysis. An interesting case, which I don't believe the public is familiar with, is captured in 2018 from a UAV flying in the Mediterranean, watching Mount Etna as it was erupting. And it appears that that object is flying through the plume of superheated gas and ash. This was a rather difficult case to resolve. We had to pull in support from a number of IC and S&T partners and even reach out to a volcanologist. And through very detailed 3D modeling and pixel by pixel analysis of the object as it's traversing across the clouds, they assessed that the object was actually 170 meters away from the plume and not flying through it. And to be clear, AARO does not believe every object is a bird, a balloon, or a UAV. We do have some very anomalous objects. It's just the nature of resolution. We can only resolve things that we understand. So we're now working on additional products where we can inform the public, Congress, and others of the objects as we're studying them, rather than once we've resolved them. With that, I'll take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kozlowski. I appreciate your testimony. It's been widely reported that individuals claiming first-hand knowledge of unreported UAP programs have been reluctant to engage with AARO. What message do you have for those individuals, and how will you work to gain their trust?
I would let them know that Congress has gone out of its way to create the organization AARO specifically to conduct these sorts of investigations, and has uniquely empowered them to have access to all UAP-related information, whether that's historic or current. Mm-hmm. And we take that responsibility and those authorities very seriously. And so we have been reaching out to a broader community, encouraging folks who had talked to AARO personnel in the past and maybe felt uncomfortable to come back to us. We've met with several of their interlocutors and a couple of firsthand witnesses, and we are making great progress, and those firsthand witnesses that we have talked to do feel comfortable coming back to us. Mm-hmm. And so we hope that more folks that do have information would go to www.aaro.mil, fill out the form, send it to us so we can bring them in for interviews and add their information to our investigations.
Thank you. I recently just read your report from March, your historic report, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in this topic to read the report, because when I was asked by a reporter about it, they said, well, it doesn't show any evidence of secret programs that have aliens. That's not how I read the report. What I read the report is the U.S. government took sightings extremely seriously over the last 75 years, put some of the greatest minds ever to analyze these cases because they assess them as some deeply unknown phenomena that may or may not cause threats, that may or may not be related to adversaries, but are certainly something that the U.S. government needed to know about. And what I read from this report is that we resolved numbers of cases, but in almost every instance, whether it was in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the noughts, half the cases were unresolved. So I don't think this is an example of the government not taking these cases seriously. I think this is an example of our government spending 75 years taking these cases very seriously. And interestingly, for the group that put together this report, they didn't have access to any firsthand reporting. And so from my perspective, for whistleblowers and people who want to come in, please come in, because the purpose of AARO is so that the senators can do our job to provide oversight, accountability, and transparency. We find it very concerning that our pilots, that our Navy officers, that people who have sightings of UAPs are denigrated, are somehow dismissed or disregarded. They need to be protected. This is a huge issue for national security because, number one, we don't have domain awareness, which is very problematic. Number two, we don't have domain superiority if we don't understand how different UAPs are flying, what technology they're using, what their mission is, what their purpose is. And at the base level, we have so many UAPs around our bases, around our military sites, around our nuclear sites, that it's deeply disturbing that adversaries at a minimum could be using these opportunities to spy, to glean intelligence that will harm our long-term national security. So I'm grateful that you're taking the whistleblowers very seriously. I'm grateful that AARO is trying its best to integrate the private sector, the public, into their work. Interestingly, in this hearing, we heard that the FAA is now working hand in glove, which is very helpful. We want this public-facing accessibility to be put in place by 2025 so that people can upload their videos, their data, their reports. I've met with people who have followed this issue for decades, and they have thousands of examples, thousands of pieces of data that ultimately I want uploaded into AARO so you can cross-reference historic information with current information, because this group at AARO are the best scientists that we can find anywhere, and they will do the work that's needed to be done. So I just want to thank you for that. And then with my last 42 seconds, can you tell us about any of the cases that merit further analysis by your IC and science and technology partners? What is it that makes these cases anomalous? And a large number of reports are placed in the active archive because AARO does not have enough information. What might prompt you to reopen a case like that, and do you have any examples?
Sure, I'll start with the active archive case. So that is just the place where we put cases where we don't have enough scientific information to resolve them at that time, but we're always looking for opportunities to correlate them to new cases that come in, as the new cases come in, as well as enrich those cases with additional data. We do have one example that I'm aware of where we were able to correlate a number of observations of interesting lights in the sky, and eventually we concluded that it was multiple people observing Starlink flares, just as an example. 3 cases that merit analysis that we're working on right now. One we might be in the process of resolving, but nonetheless is still interesting. The first one was brought to us by a law enforcement officer out west, where he observed a large orange orb floating several hundred feet above the ground a couple miles away. He went to investigate what was going on with that orb. And as he was pulling up to the location where he thought would be below the orb, about 40 to 60 meters away from some object the area was well lit, he saw a blacker than black object. He said it was about the size of a Prius, 4 to 6 feet wide. And as he got 40 to 60 meters away from the object, it tilted up about 45 degrees, and then it shot up vertically. He says 10 to 100 times faster than any drone he's ever seen before. And it did that without making a sound, as far as he could tell from inside of his vehicle. And just as it left his field of view through his windshield, then it emitted very bright red and blue lights that illuminated the inside of his vehicle as brightly as if someone had set off fireworks just outside his vehicle, or street flares. So that's anomalous because of the size of the vehicle with the great acceleration. And when he came back to investigate that area, he found no disturbance of the ground beneath it. So that's one interesting one. Another one comes to us from Southeast US. There was a US facility where 2 cars of government contractors were leaving the facility around 9 o'clock in the morning. They looked up in the sky and saw a large metallic cylinder about the size of a commercial airplane, and it was stationary. They observed that there was a very bright white light behind or around the object. They saw it stationary for 15 to 20 seconds, and then it disappeared. Obviously, an object that large, stationary, unless it's a blimp, is unusual, but then disappearing, we can't explain how that would happen. And then the last case was interesting. We had a aircraft that was flying parallel to another aircraft, and it was capturing imagery of it, and a small-looking object appeared to fly between the two of them much faster than them. Through very careful analysis, we think that the object might have actually been further away than the object that it was videotaping, but it requires very careful analysis to come to those conclusions, and we don't have the metadata to support that yet.
Senator Ernst.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Kozlowski, you mentioned that you do work with the intelligence community. You're working with the FAA. Has AARO involved academia? Have you gone to universities? Do you have outside organizations that you are working with? And if so, can you walk us through some of that collaboration?
Sure. Right now, most of our collaborations that are veering towards academia are with university-affiliated research centers associated with universities or with FFRDCs. Our partnership with universities, I would say, is lacking right now. We have some one-off associations with university professors. However, that's our fault, and it's largely because of the need to declassify data. We need to give the professors something to work on before we can really engage them. So we're working significantly on a declassification effort. We've hired a number of declassification experts, and we're going to be trying to get cases like the ones that I just discussed here declassified so that we can engage with the universities on a regular basis and provide them the data. Talking to a scientist without data is going to be rather disappointing. So hopefully in 2025, we'll be increasing those efforts.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I think there's a huge pool of talent out there that you should tap into. Given the public's growing concern and interest in UAPs, how do you balance the need for the transparency that our public is demanding with the potential risks of revealing classified defense information?
Yeah, that's always a concern that's on the front of our minds. We want to make sure that we're deconflicting both on potential U.S. programs and what the IC might be tracking for adversarial programs as we're aggregating that information and preparing to share it. However, oftentimes we can remove the discussion of the unidentified and anomalous activity from the sensitive information that our partners are concerned with. And that's usually going to be the platforms that the information was collected with, if it is truly anomalous. And so we have our partners working alongside in the declassification of that data.
Very good. And then without having to explain the UAP, what do we need to begin really doing about them? What precautions can we take? What should we be doing about them?
I think that removing the stigma, reducing the stigma is the first step. We need to make sure that we're having honest and transparent conversations about them, because if we're hesitant to discuss them, then it opens the opportunity for an adversary, as you had mentioned earlier, Senator Gillibrand, to come in and conduct some activity. So we need to do that, and we need to have more persistent monitoring and understand that whether it is a UAP or a counter-UAS issue, that we need to have that complete domain awareness around our national security facilities.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just a couple of follow-up questions. We didn't discuss in this setting the most recent UAP or UAS encounter with bases like Langley. I know that the incursion by UASs that were publicly made available through the press that took over 2 weeks was fairly alarming to senators, because there was a question about what technology they were using. There was a question about why it was so hard to detect. Can you speak to how AARO will be integrated into the review of these kinds of cases, and how you can be helpful to both the intelligence community and the Department of Defense in analyzing or being able to more quickly analyze what's knowable and what's not knowable, so that because once you do identify it as a drone, for example, it then goes to the right department at DOD or the intelligence community to assess, deal with, or take down as the incident might be. But to talk to us a little bit about what role you can play for both the DOD and the IC community in these kinds of incursions that are happening when we don't know what tech is being used and we don't understand a flight pattern, or we don't understand how they arrive and depart in the way they do.
Yeah, we are generally going to be supporting them through an advisory capacity as an organization that naturally needs to conduct baseline experiments of the environment to see what normal looks like, whether it's balloons, birds, anomalous activity, or drones flying through an environment. We're going to gather a lot of data that will allow us to characterize an environment very well and then detect and follow those tracks, hopefully rather efficiently. There's also a lot of overlap in the type of sensors that are going to be used for the counter-UAS mission and the UAP mission, whether that's active detection like radars or passive like cameras. And so as AARO is trying to push the bounds on detectability for UAP, we're hopefully going to have best practices that we can also provide to the counter-UAS, and potentially we might have additional technologies that we can offer them to support.
I'd like to just address a little bit of reporting and feedback. As you know, AARO is required to develop a mechanism for the public to report UAP information. Now that that mechanism for current and former military, civilian, and contractor personnel has been established, can you speak to AARO's plans for a public reporting mechanism, and how did AARO arrive at this approach, and were other options considered? And second, for pilots and operators who have reported a UAP, what feedback, if any, has AARO provided to these individuals related to what AARO is doing with their report and how the report has been resolved? How does such feedback or lack thereof impact the frequency of UAP reporting?
Yeah, the public reporting mechanism that we've decide to go with is going to look similar to the reporting mechanism that we currently have for historical events, where we're going to ask folks to go to our website, download a PDF form, put in the narrative for their account, and then email that to us with accompanying media. Usually it'll probably be imagery. We went with that option because we thought, one, we could do it rather quickly, we could do it efficiently, make it very cost effective for the taxpayer, but also we think we can gather all the data that we're going to need to conduct our analysis. And then we're going to have that feed into an automated processing system that will cross-correlate that against all the other public reported cases as well as the US government cases. We did consider a number of other reporting mechanisms as to include automated online forms as well as cell phone apps. And we ultimately decided that this would be the safest, cheapest, and easiest to maintain in the future while protecting the private information of the individuals who are reporting. Regarding the feedback from the resolved reports, right now we don't have a good feedback mechanism. It's fairly informal. We're working on building a case management system that AARO will use at all classification levels, and hopefully in that we'll be able to provide feedback as the case is going through the resolution process. We have multiple phases. Then the folks who report that, whether it's a pilot at the classified level or someone potentially reporting through another mechanism, they'll get that automated feedback. And then it is not determined at this point yet how much information we'll be able to include in that feedback where it is in the process. It'll depend on the classification of the resolution of the case.
My final question is there anything that you need to tell the Senate that you need from us, whether it's funding, whether it's support, whether it's legislation? Is there any requests that AARO has of us, or anything else you need to brief us on for us to be able to do our jobs to protect our service members, as well as integrate public interest and public data and information into the future analysis efforts of AARO?
So first of all, I want to say thank you again. I think that the authorities that we have are remarkable, and I think that we are well-resourced as an office. The only ask that I would have is that you continue to champion us, particularly with witnesses, encourage them to come forward and report to us so that we can have a more fulsome investigation of the potential historic or ongoing legacy programs.
Thank you so much. Hearing adjourned.
Okay, gang. You could put your cameras on. That was another big nothing burger. Wasn't even a burger, it was a snack, but absolutely. Ian, you're very familiar with AARO. This was the new director of AARO, replacing Sean Kirkpatrick, who was caught in a bunch of lies about his investigation. So this guy, McCloskey, I think his name was, is replacing him, trying to look more seriously at the phenomena, but obviously is not. I mean, if you have all these anomalous cases, don't just write them off as anomalous. Say what they could be. I mean, this is a huge cover-up in the process. We just saw it there. Once again, the government's not telling us what they know and what they don't know. So yeah, you can call it anomalous, but why not call it something else? Cam, do you have a comment? Or Ian, do you have a comment about this? Or
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed. I was surprised it was that short, and it sounded like they were just reading off kind of a script. Yeah, it was very disappointing, unfortunately. I mean, there just wasn't any information that was, it was like we went backwards with this hearing. And I agree with you that they should be able to label, certain things as, what they are more than just anomalous. And the technology, at least they're mentioning the word technology more, but in this hearing, they didn't get any further into that. And obviously, that's a big thing for me, because that means changing our human civilization and getting us off of all these fossil fuels and everything. So
yeah.
I'm really sad. That has nothing to do with national security whatsoever. So it's a bummer that they don't talk more about that. Like, hey, we could eliminate climate change right now if we get a hold of this technology. They don't mention anything like that.
Of course they don't, but they also failed to mention anything that was said on Wednesday,
Right.
about what Elizondo said, what about Gallivan said about, yes, there are craft that are not from any country on the planet. So, Ian, why are they doing this to us?
I guess it's they're still messing around and trying to find some sort of starting place where they can approach the general public with this kind of crazy attitude that, oh, we're all new to this, but we're going to take a look into it and we're going to find out. And gradually, I suppose their plan is to unroll it. But we already know we're well ahead of the curve. Those of us who are involved, we know there's much more involved. It's much more complex. And we're not just chasing lights in the sky. We know there's abductions, crash retrievals, retrieved bodies, direct contact with extraterrestrials, abductions, and the things that go into let's say, the realm of the interdimensional realm as well, connecting everything with cryptids to well, you name it. It's all connected, and it's all a level of consciousness. We're well beyond all that.
It's such a complex problem, situation. Harlan, jump in there, unmute yourself. Yeah, hi.
I mean, yeah, it was a total joke. And, but what Ian was just saying, look, all this is just a very, very minuscule little, like putting a little crack into what we already know, into like the scientific, public, national security domain, to at least to kind of acknowledge it just a little bit more. But I mean, it's such a farce, right? And, it's laughable. And I felt like I just wasted my time listening to that. But, all they're doing is just barely scratching the surface to the general public, to the government, that, hey, at least the people that are seeing this instead of not reporting it, will listen to you credibly. That's about all that came of it. But geez, I mean, look, obviously, we're not just going to shift to like, yes, there are other civilizations and free energy and anti-gravity, and we're going to join the Galactic Federation overnight. So this was just this one little tiny baby step in the general domain of our government. And look, Trump's coming back in. He's got his Space Force. So they're inching. I mean, they're literally
I
inching
think it
and
was a
inching
step
towards it.
backwards,
And it
actually.
was,
We went
I
much
agree, backwards.
more
So,
forward on Wednesday when people were just
yes, I know.
acknowledging
I watched
extraterrestrial.
Wednesday with Neil
Yes.
Gower. I watched, not live, but I watched Neil's
Well, you should have
replay.
watched
So
my
his little
you should have
commentary.
watched my watch
And,
party, but
and so, look, I think we're giving too much credence to what they're saying here on the Hill in the Capitol. It's like, the hell with those idiots. We know what's really going on, but it's good that, thank you, Alan, so much for hosting it. I'm so glad I was able to join today and have this little bit of a kicking it around.
well, hang in there a little bit, Harlan. I'm going to just go back to Ian for a second where they mentioned Langley. Can you tell us what Langley was? Because you're probably the most expert in that field.
Yeah, I mean, reports are still coming in about what actually happened, but I guess it's the consensus is now it's 17 nights of swarms of unidentified drones that flew over Langley. That's 17 nights over.
Langley
US
is an Air Force base off the coast of what, North Carolina?
It's Virginia, isn't it? We're talking
Virginia,
about
okay.
you know, and we're talking about this is Langley Air Force Base in Hampton. It's unbelievable that first of all we've got this admission, a frank admission, that it happened again over U.S. military facilities over several nights, and nobody seems to know who it is, what they're doing, and they can't do anything about it. That's a frank admission over US military facilities. And why do we get these tidbits? We know that there's been these incursions over US military facilities and all military facilities of all nations over the years. But we're getting this now and in such numbers. But then again, it's not referred to, it's not mentioned.
They mentioned Langley, but they didn't tell us what you just said about 17 nights of UAP incursions. There's someone in the chat that says on YouTube, I grew up near 2 nuclear power plants on Lake Michigan, and I've had encounters with things that are not human nuclear power and is not human knowledge. So he's someone that, a lot of nuclear power plants and ICBM missiles have had UFO contact.
Okay, I mean, what about 2001, Dr. Greer's disclosure back then with all those guys talking about UFOs over missile bases? We know about this. We know it's real. We know that there's completely verifiable. This was such a joke, like, oh, these were balloons, this is that. And what about September 27th? I'm throwing it in the chat. Alana Danan posted all of this footage of 1,000 people watching not only anomalous lights, but TR-3Bs flying information. And that just happened not even 2 months ago. And
what about
1,000 witnesses.
Robert Salas in Montana in 1967 was the first to report a UFO over nuclear warheads in the ground that would shut off those
Exactly.
nuclear warheads.
We know all this stuff. So we're just inching our way towards it becoming part of mainstream public knowledge. And obviously, that's what's going to have to happen. And this was just like that one little nudge, like, okay, come on, at least we're talking about it, even though they discredit it so much. They're so locked in a 3D mindset. Come on, they're scientists, they're politicians, they're working from a very, very locked down 3D perspective. And they're at least trying to open up to these bigger possibilities, but barely. They're really keeping it like, very minimal. So,
let's talk to someone who's not 3D. Where'd you go, Steve? Oh, there you are, Steve. Come on.
Hey, can you hear me, Alan? Am I on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I thought, just as a sort of relatively disinterested party in what the government does, that they are offering sort of a framework for people to report things, right? I think that's a good thing, but it's the government. And I was just thinking that there's lots of people who need busy work. We know that federal employees only come in 1 day a week. So, is it busy work or is it actually a framework to report this stuff? If it's a framework to report it, we have to worry about the government kind of editing it and doing what they want with it. but it also is a start, because is there another, outside of sort of MUFON, is there anything else that's like databasing this stuff? And I would like to think that the government has enough money, to database it correctly. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there is a UFO reporting center out of Washington State, and they and MUFON compare their notes. So there are private. I trust those more than a government.
But the other thing is, would this be police reports too? Because the general public might not know about MUFON and stuff, right? And what happens with these things is that you get the general public, you get the public who are interested in UFOs reporting things, and not the general public at large. And again, I use one of my friends, the esoteric people versus the exoteric people. And we really want the exoteric people to get involved and report biased reports on UFOs, or on phenomena. And so I actually thought it was interesting that they're doing it. I mean, I don't care what the government does. We know it's going to be, but with the new change of administration, we can also hope that if they cut down a lot of the fat off the government, there might be actually people who want to do the job and do the job correctly. So we all have that sort of back pocket hope. Anyway, thanks, Alan. Appreciate it.
No, but what do you think, everyone, of that case where they said that object disappeared in front of them? That was anomalous, but it wasn't anything else. Let's just call it anomalous instead of really trying to understand what it is. Ian, what do you do with a case like that?
Well, we're walking down two paths here. We're walking down a path where the guys in charge are now laying it out and saying, we're new to this, we're learning and everything else. And of course, we've got the new terminology of the UAP. We're not talking about UFOs or flying saucers anymore. So they put a distance and a barrier between that. So we're tiptoeing down that road. It's almost as though, hold on a minute, we've wiped the slate clean, we've started again. No one's talking about the previous administration, the previous organizations who have done this and covered it up for years and years. Yet all of us who are involved in this phenomena know that behind the scenes, there's a well-oiled, well-equipped, well-organized, fast reactionary force that can bring black helicopters in straight away to follow marked abductees who have experiences. There's animal mutilations, there's crash retrievals. It's all going on. But we're now on the public face, which denies any of this and doesn't know any of this and doesn't want to interview any of the people involved in these historic cases. We're just starting fresh. We're learning. So, but a few frank admissions about these strange things, incursions and everything else, which they're maybe throwing in. But when we look at the huge amount of data that we've established over the years, look, they're not even calling in any UFO experts. Right. We don't see Linda Moulton Howe in there. We don't see Richard Dolan in there. We haven't seen any of these people being brought in and talking about it. It's frustrating and annoying. But I think what we're witnessing here is a slow drip and a kind of like gradual reveal as they want it to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not even a drip. I think they've stopped the leaks. Cam, what are you thinking? Are you busy? Cam. Cam does CE5 gatherings and has had some really amazing.
And by the way, I just want to interject here. You mentioned about the other UFO databasing organization based in Seattle. I think you're referring to Peter Davenport's
Peter Davenport.
NURFC, which has been going since 1974 and has catalogued something near 200,000 reports. It's a very good resource. I've used it myself, and one of the few places, I mean, MUFON, they don't even have the 24-hour UFO hotline that the NUFORC, and kudos to them, still having UFO in their name.
Like MUFON does have a 24-hour hotline?
No, I guess it's kind of like you put a report into MUFON and maybe they'll get back to you, maybe they don't. Often I speak to people who don't hear back from MUFON. Sometimes they do. I guess it just depends upon the category and the caliber of the researchers and field investigators in the state where you make your report.
Right. Well, thanks, Ian. Steve, you have something to say, or I can go to Shelley. Shelley, go ahead, Steve, and then
No,
Shelley.
I just again, I think I think this is not a negative thing, and I'm a pretty negative guy. Just the fact that they have they're opening it up to, and again, I see as systems that are kind of atrophied sometimes by celebrities and the standard characters. Broadening it out to more characters and more involvement from people through other avenues is never a bad thing for the truth. It might not be the best thing for the people who are trying to monopolize the truth, but it's a good thing for the truth. So I thought it was an interesting and positive meeting,
Well,
even though I
that's
don't like the
good. I'm
government.
surprised you're positive. I thought it was very negative because they didn't actually address anything or say anything of any significance
Hey, be
except
quiet, Alan. Stop that.
except the
Look,
thing that, no, they didn't even reference
yeah.
the people
Let,
who
let,
testified in Washington on Wednesday saying, yes, there are
Well, because
alien,
Alan, we've
alien
sort of
craft.
agreed that Elizondo, that book is just to sell books.
No,
Elizondo
no,
wants to be
it's
the.
not. But he came out and said, we have foreign craft that is not from this earth. And that was
And they said he
something
couldn't
we needed
talk
to
about it
discuss.
in public, so
yeah,
it's a bad look. It's a
but
bad look.
also, if I can jump in here, he did back up David Grush, which was very important that we have
Exactly.
the validation of David Grush. And here we are. We've got guys who are swearing on oath before Congress that this is true. We are starting to, but no one's taking it further. They're not taking it to the next step. And here we go again on this one where we're tiptoeing around it. We're not even referencing it.
They're not taking. Well, let me ask Shelley. She said this could be a slow feed, War of the Worlds conditioning. Shelley, you want to talk about what you're sensing about this hearing today? You want to put on your, you want to put on your camera?
Yeah, hey.
Hi.
Hi from Arizona. Like listening to this is really hard as an experiencer. It like taps right into my nervous system. And what I feel intuitively is that, there's obviously a narrative. They're obviously not telling the truth. And the reason for that, I truly feel, is that they're grooming the public for a possible, to hold on to that narrative for a possible, like Blue Beam scenario or War of the Worlds scenario where they use that for the control of everyone. So, I think this is very serious, and that however it happens, inserting those people who are the true authorities in this, Linda, Ian, Alan, all of you, like getting your voices heard in the world on the public stage is really, really important right now. They're not going to listen to me. I'm just I'm an experiencer, and most of the experiences, by the way, are not 3D. It doesn't have anything to do with lights in the sky. It's like a whole nother level that's going to have to probably be unearthed at some point. So, like really take the reins, guys.
Right. People say that's the post-disclosure. What we're looking at is building towards at least a public acknowledgement in a pre-disclosure world, which we're in. We're getting close to maybe people like you, Shelley, and a lot of people Ian know, and definitely Steve's an experiencer. I hope you don't mind me telling people that, Steve. Okay, maybe is that. But what would Linda say about this, Ian? What do you think? Because Ian works with Linda Moulton Howe.
I'm in close contact with Linda, and I know that today she was monitoring this whole event as well. She's incorporating it into tomorrow's show. She's watching every move, and she has multiple feeds and sources where she's discussing this and looking at all aspects. Obviously, we're all far ahead of the curve of what these guys want to let us know is their state of affairs. So I think that those of us who know, we're just having to bite our tongues and hold on tight, and it is frustrating. I think it's a PR show for the public to bring them slowly on board. but I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, whether or not, because we're looking now at 70 or 80 years of official cover-ups. Those are the official cover-ups, but then once they start acknowledging the small parts, then the more difficult questions come to the fore.
Yeah, this was definitely felt like a step backwards. Steve felt it was a good, positive thing. I don't know. At least they're talking about it. Maybe we could say that. Cam, any final words from you about anything you heard today that made any sense or moved the ball or was,
Actually,
yeah.
Alan, just I think it was more positive than the congressional hearing, to be honest. All right,
No, I
because
don't think so. But let's see
I
what
think the
Cam has to
congressional
say.
hearing was a step back.
No, I don't. Anyway, Cam, what
Okay.
about you?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank everybody else who came on. I haven't heard Ian speak or some of the other people speak, and I really appreciate all of your input. That was excellent. Yeah, there's so much that they're not touching on. They're just basically creeping by. Sorry, I'm out of breath because I'm actually changing a tire right now. But they, I wish it would talk so much more about so many things. Obviously, they've already been mentioned. And for us people who are experiencers, people who have been involved in this for many, many years, sometimes decades, a lot of us, it's very frustrating, of course. It's also frustrating to understand, creating awareness for the collective, the masses that maybe aren't even into ETs, don't even know much about it. I think it's really, really important for them to give a lot more information. One of the other things I always think about is the Antarctic Treaty, that's never been broken by any countries. And number two is that these have been downed in many, many other countries. So the U.S. kind of almost acts as if, they said it a couple of times that, yeah, something's been downed in Brazil and here and there, but that's best all they talk about. They don't really get into it. And it's like, okay, well, we know that these have been down other places in the world, many, many other countries in the world. How many countries have they been down? Let's talk about that. How many times have one of these been down, possibly re-engineered by another country? So they keep talking about national security, national security. It's like, well, wait a minute. We know these other countries have had these down craft, especially Brazil and other places. And that other countries, most likely, of course, why would they not be reverse engineering this technology? And if they have, then how come we don't see it in the military coming from their side? Now they say, okay, maybe so this is coming from their side, but they don't really get into that, very deeply. And if it's coming from their side and we reverse engineered it on our side, how come now all of a sudden, like the SR-71 or whatever, why is that the best thing that we have? Why don't we have flying saucers fighting Ukraine Russia war, so they don't get into that. So that's I find that very interesting. Yeah, they're
We're a
barely just
long
creeping
way
along.
from even saying the word flying saucer, UFO, UA as acknowledgement. All we could say
Right.
is they're anomalous, which is stupid. It's like saying it's like why don't you just say what would otherworldly craft be called except anomalous, or can't you find if they're not anything else, why couldn't they be extraterrestrial? Why doesn't anyone ever say that? So it's frustrating.
It is. I agree.
Well, all right. Anyone? I'm good.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was looking for some footage from the other day, the hearings of the other day. You have anything I wanted to play something to show us that there was a bit of a step forward. Let me just play the Garcia comment. What's that guy's name in House of Representatives? Something Garcia. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, I'll tell you in a moment.
Garcia, UAP hearing. He said some a lot of people said some interesting comments. Let me here. I'll play this one here. All right, let me just play this one. Because here he goes into a little more detail. Here, let me see if I can just pull this up, and then we'll conclude. But here we go. Share. This is from News Nation. Okay. Here we go.
Encounters for years. Now, because of the stigma around reporting these incidents, we still don't have a complete picture of actually what's going on, particularly as our witnesses will testify on the civilian side, and that is a real problem that we have today in the country. Now, it's very important that we show that Democrats and Republicans in Congress can come together in a bipartisan way to cut through misinformation and to...
Sorry, this is not what I wanted to show. That's from last year. I was going to show something from Wednesday. Do you have that handy, Ian? Do you know?
I'm just checking the resources. I've got Garcia's opening statement, if you like. But again, that just references me back.
The thing about what Garcia said on Wednesday was, he said, who in the government is hiding these secrets? Or is there any? And he is the government. He's asking these people coming forward, who is there anyone in the government that is hiding these secrets? They say yes, but this guy is the government. It's like one part of the government doesn't know what the other part's doing, which is obvious, but why can't there be a reckoning? Because obviously,
well, all I can say is that they said they were going to, the quote was, the media soundbite was, they were going to, the hearing was aimed at pulling back the curtain. That's where we are. We're slightly pulling back the curtain, but we're not seeing the full picture. Those of us who know, I mean, as we always say, those of us who are involved need no convincing, and those who need convincing need not be involved.
That's right. Steve, any final words from you? Steve Spear, Mystic, unmute yourself. So yeah.
I think that my favorite quote, which I've said many times, is Ouspensky said we need to learn to think in different categories. And one of the things that we have to really worry about is when the government imposes categories on us about how we view these things, right? And how, and really it's a manifold experience. It's not just, it's psychic, it's physical. I'm also, very interested in, Alan, I like the Wilhelm Reich story, which I think the Wilhelm Reich story has been totally sort of expunged from the UFO narrative. And Reich's biome-powered, biomechanoid UFOs have been totally expunged. And when anything is expunged and kept out of the narrative, I believe that's where the attention should go. I also just like to always talk about, when I talk about the Wilhelm Reich thing, H.G. Wells, I think, Horror in the Heights, which is about bioorganic UFOs, was written in like 1905 or something. So if anybody's curious about that, but I think we need to not have categories imposed on us. But I think this is a good thing that maybe people can start imposing other categories through this initiative. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. The thing about Wilhelm Reich, he had these things called cloudbusters, which used orgone energy that would actually call in the UFOs, the ships.
Well, it was the Door experiment, Alan. It was the Door experiment where he pulled out the deadly orgone radiation. He put the needle of uranium in the orgone box, and that, he said, started he calls it the cosmic civil war. And then he went out with the cloudbusters and started like draining the power out of the end, which goes to what I said to you the other day on the Travis Taylor stuff, where Travis Taylor is saying they're being fed on blood, and that's why the cattle mutilations. That fits into the Reichian thing, because I believe there's a kind of hormonal aspect to UFOs, certain UFOs, not the mechanical ones. And I'll shut up. Thanks, Alan.
You're right. This is such a deep, complex subject, and they're not even on the surface, those people today. I really think anyway. Cam, do you have something else to say?
Just two more things. Number one, the fact that Lou Elizondo stated that they have gotten non-human intelligent biologicals, and for them not to go further into that for the entire human civilization, it's like, wait a minute. Have you spoken to them? Where are they from? What kind of how high is their IQ? What have they taught you? What have we learned from them? I mean, there's just some questions, of course. And so that's such a huge thing for the collective human consciousness right there. That is just disturbing. And number two is that this kind of goes with the Antarctica Treaty and what I was talking about being UFOs or UAPs being down in other countries. I think that they actually have a an underground kind of agreement with other countries. You know, since the U.S. of course is basically the policeman of the world, and the UN and all of that, to have the veto power. You know, that, hey, let's be hush hush about this technology, because otherwise they would be using it in the military aspects. I think
Yeah.
they do have some type of agreement where they're saying, okay, well, we have to agree that we can't allow the public to know about this. So we have to agree to keep all of this technology under wraps, even though we've reverse engineered it possibly 70 years ago. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's good. And why doesn't, I'm going to find that little clip. Why don't they ask, what about what David Grush said? We have bodies and craft. Why didn't Gillibrand go right there? Ian.
Yeah, exactly. Don't forget, these guys, I keep coming back to it, but these guys have testified on oath to Congress. They've testified. These things are real. We have biologics. We have an active program of crash retrievals. And we know, going back to, for example, I always quote Dr. Carla Turner's book, Taken. The very first account is an account from a North American Midwestern girl on a farm who says that a well-organized group came in with hazmat suits and everything, cleaned up after a UFO event in 1954. It goes way back. That's 54. That's 75 years ago. What's going on?
We seem to be going backwards. I'm going to end from last year's July 26, 2023. That was I think like the House is more evolved than the Senate, which is disappointing. But this was one of the statements by Grush that's not even referred to in this hearing from AARO. Right here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our witnesses who are testifying today. I want to thank each of you for being here to discuss a topic.
Okay, here we go.
Our skies, whether these are UAPs or weather phenomena, advanced technology from American, allied, or enemy forces, or something more out of this world. So my first question, I have several questions, and if we can just be quick on these first two, I'm going to ask each of you the same question, and then I'll get to each of you individually. The first one, when you reported your experiences with a UAP, did any of you face any repercussions with your superiors, yes or no?
No.
No. I've actually never seen anything personally, believe it or not. So.
All right. And then do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs, yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated publicly, yes.
Yes, the government is asking these guys, is there anyone in the government, why don't they get it together?
I think previously with like Project Blue Book, yes, but currently I don't speak for the United States government.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions for Mr. Graves. What percentage of UAP sightings, in your belief, go unreported by our pilots?
This is an approximation based off of my personal experience speaking with a number of pilots, but I would estimate we're somewhere near 5% reporting, perhaps.
So like 95% basically don't report seeing UAPs?
That's just my personal estimate.
In the incident off Virginia Beach, do you believe the Navy took the danger to your aircraft seriously after it was reported?
Absolutely.
A few questions for Mr. Favor. As an expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
Many dismiss UAP reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapon systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test ranges for that.
It took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be declassified. Do you feel there was a good reason to prevent lawmakers from having access to this footage?
No, I just think it was ignored when it happened, and it just sat somewhere in a file. Never got reported.
I don't think it was ignored. It was denied.
in a drawer. It happens a lot up here. Shocker. Mr. Gresh, a couple of questions for you too, sir, this morning. What percentage of UAPs do you feel are adequately investigated by the U.S. government, of the 5% that are reported?
I can only speak for my personal leadership over at NGA. I tried to look at every report that came through that I could triage. So,
do you believe that officials at the highest levels of our national security apparatus have unlawfully withheld information from Congress and subverted our oversight authority?
There are certain elected leaders that had more information that I'm not sure what they've shared with certain Gang of Eight members or et cetera, but certainly I would not be surprised.
Okay. You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred.
You can't discuss it. That means yes.
Yeah.
If you believe we have crashed
What
craft,
are you saying, Ian? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, as I often say, what's more interesting is what they don't say or what they won't say in public. That's so telling. And like you say, the denial or the I can't say in public, take it as a yes, but we can't say.
This hearing was a step forward. This is July 26, 2023, over a year ago. We've just been going backwards. Let me.
Stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Now, why doesn't AARO talk to those people, whoever in whatever program that is? Why do we
Because
have
it's the government, Alan.
I know, but why do we
They
always
don't
have
talk to each
start-
other. It's a bloated mess. It doesn't work. It's dysfunctional. So yeah, that's a real negative to finding anything out. And let's see if Musk gets in there and actually can clean things up a little bit and have different agencies communicate with each other, or actually get rid of some of those agencies, right?
Well, or at least have them talk to each other, But I think.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One more thing. I talked to Danny Sheehan about this, Ian, Steve. Danny says the president can come in and get rid of all the NDAs, just write them off, and no one would get in trouble. But we need the executive to do that. So maybe you're a guy, Steve. Maybe he's the one. I don't know. Let's see if you could do something. Anyway.
Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon?
A hostile witness list. That's the next step here. We did not get that publicly.
Can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super. Thank you. And I yield back.
All right. That was at least a step forward. I just wanted to end
If you own a home in Westchester County or upstate New York, you could get the latest solar panels installed at no cost. Now, I'm not saying this is free.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
That was Elisa Stefanik, Alan?
That was where? Who?
Elise Stefanik speaking just then?
Oh, Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace. She ran the last hearing on Wednesday. It was her subcommittee that did that. So anyway, Ian, we have a big future ahead of us, don't we?
We absolutely do. We've got a lot of work to do. I mean, thank God we know an alternative reality to the one that they're trying to paint for us now, or they're just pulling back the curtain. But thank God we know. Thank God.
It's so embarrassing, I think.
Ian, can I ask a question of Ian, Alan?
Yeah, sure.
What is the work? You said we have a lot of work to do. What would that work be?
Well, getting the
Okay.
truth.
The work is, as far as I can see it, we've not heard about the abductees, the experiencers, the people who have lived with this for their lives. They are well aware of the ET presence, of the alien presence on Earth, and they need to be vindicated, and they need to know that they've struggled throughout their whole lives with a society that has been taught and conditioned and told that UFOs don't exist, that it's balloons or whatever. It's just ridiculous. These people who know the reality need to be vindicated, and the rest of the people who don't know need to know. That's the work. This is the ET presence on Earth or with us is the most important issue facing humanity.
I agree. Experiencers are the key to unraveling this whole thing, and they're completely thrown under the bus, or at least not even talked about,
Yeah.
And I think we're a couple of years off before we have a hearing of experiencers, but that has to happen. You're absolutely right. It is the most important issue, because when that comes out, all the stuff that Cam was saying about the free energy, the technologies, the what I call the new realities, that's going to be, at least acknowledge that there's not we're not living in the reality we've been programmed to think we're living in, the conditioned and mind control.
And everything changes. Everything changes. Everything that we ever knew or thought we knew changes.
Right. Look for Ian on Linda Moulton Howe show, Earth Files, every Wednesday night, 9:30 Pacific in New York. It's a YouTube channel. I guess it's, 6:30 Pacific. So Ian's the moderator there. He's always up on the latest UFO activity. Even when you don't know, even behind the scenes, I was still shocked, Ian, when you knew my story better than I did.
Yeah. I've known from my background checking, and I knew your story, and I'm so glad that we had that connection in 2016 and going forward 2019 and onwards. So looking forward to working with you even more.
We'll hang out more. Steve, thank you for your metaphysical, esoteric insights and your practical knowledge. Cam does CE5s in San Diego. Cam, what's your website for? You want to say it?
Sorry, I've been driving, multitasking, taking off tires and putting. So you can go to my YouTube as CE5 San Diego for YouTube. That's really the only channel I have. I don't have a website right now, but there's videos of some of what we've done with night vision. And there was one where we had a bunch of people who work with Dr. Stephen Greer. This was actually almost a couple years ago now. Well, actually, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, October of 2022, maybe it was. But anyway, and there was something that was flashing at us for about 20 minutes, and it was stationary. And then people in the comments are trying to say that, oh, well, that's just a stationary satellite. And no, those satellites are over 20,000 miles above the Earth, geocentric satellites. I looked it up, and you can't see them with the naked eye. You can't see anything past 400 miles at that size by the naked eye. And so it was something that was flashing at us. And what was so interesting is that I felt it was, in my heart, my intuition, it was like I was being downloaded. It was the same craft with the same beings. 3 events in a row. That never happened. I've been doing this since 2009. 3 events in a row, same exact spot in the sky. And we actually looked at the stars and everything, with the later with the night vision. And we got night vision on all 3 times. And the first time, I think it was 10 minutes. The second event was 20 minutes. And then the last event was like 5 minutes. Maybe they said, oh, okay, you've seen us enough. We made our point. But that was pretty significant because I've never had anything like that happen.
Wow, thanks, Cam. We'll do some C5s when we're all out there. And
would love it.
On your right, Ian. And Shelley Reef, incredible sound healer. Shelley, any final words from you Or are you still not? Oh, there you are. Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to really thank you all for the community that you make possible here. Ian said it, it's really hard to be in this position, and I'm trying to write a book about it, but it's really scary to come out with it. But having all of you at my back, like, really makes it accessible, and I'm so grateful. So thank you. I'll be here training people in harps and telepathy until that day. Thanks.
Thank you. And maybe we'll do an experiencers forum, Ian.
We should do that. Definitely, we should do that. Because the experiences should be heard, their stories need to be told, and they need to be given the respect they deserve.
Edgar Mitchell said it's the experiences that hold the key to consciousness. The UFO experiences hold the key to consciousness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I think we need to talk to experiences. We're not chasing lights in the sky.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Give my love to Linda Moulton Howe when you talk to her, and
we'll do.
Thanks,
thank
Alan.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Alan.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
everyone
Shelley.
online for watching. I appreciate
Right,
it.